The Vancouver Pride Festival, Vancouver Pride Parade, is Vancouver's largest public event. The city of Vancouver spends more money on policing, traffic control, and surveillance on the Pride Parade than any other public event in the year. And if you've been, you'll know it's this festival, this experience of community gathering from all over the Lower Mainland in this celebration of life and delight and the colors and the children and the elders and everybody in between gathered to celebrate this joyful love fest. Anybody been to the parade? Wow! Go! Maybe we should schedule worship early so we can do the parade dash. Yeah, please. It's an incredible festival. Get a bus. Let's get a bus. Okay, who's on that? Okay, record that. But it wasn't always so. 40 years ago, the Pride Parade was an angry protest by people sick and tired of being emotionally, physically, spiritually abused for simply being who they are. Police would raid clubs and bars where the gay community gathered just to be with one another so they could be safe. The Pride Parade 40 years ago was an angry protest. Even today, friends of mine who've walked in the parade have told me they've seen in apartments along the parade route ugly signs. Signs that hold up the clobber texts from the Bible, the lessons, the scripture lessons that clobber and abuse gay and lesbian people. There's 6 of them. There's only 6 of them. But they use those. Or, God hates faggots. You're all going to hell. They'll read that. You don't have to scratch the surface very far to see religious people, Jerry Falwell and Franklin Graham, and organizations like Focus on the Family say and proclaim that where the gays are concerned, God's love is conditional. Anita Bryant is still out there. Some places, some Christian churches, say it's okay to be gay, just don't do anything about it. Can you imagine, Myrna, if the tables were turned and it was a gay world and you were a straight person? It's okay to be straight, just don't do anything about it. Can you imagine? Right. Can you imagine? Or, you can be here, but if you come out, you can't be in leadership positions, especially with children. And we say, that couldn't happen in Vancouver, but you know, in Vancouver, it's still not particularly safe. Do you remember the Orlando shooting? Do you remember that an angry, angry man over what U.S. was doing in Syria and Iraq opened fire on a gay bar, and 49 people died and 53 people were injured? It was the largest violent act on the LGBTQ community. It was the single largest act of terrorism since 9/11. The gay community around the world gathered in vigil in places, public places, just to hold. And there was a public vigil in Vancouver. On his way to the vigil, Dallas Groot was punched square in the back, sending him flying on the floor on Granville Street, requiring hospitalization on his way to the vigil. Why? Because he's gay. It happens in Vancouver. Well, I also want to say, and people who are non-binary, people who don't identify either of those genders, well, as far as all those other institutions, they're lost completely. Gone, lost completely. And we ask, where's God in all of this? So I think about the creed. I want to hold up the United Church of Canada creed, the new creed. And we say at every baptism, we believe in God who has created and is creating. So God didn't create once, God is creating. I want to hold that up as we return to that beautiful story that Shirley read for us today. That mystical fable about how God created the world. We love that story. It's a foundational story. Let's consider the context. I want to unpack it just a little bit. Let's consider the context. Do you remember, in the beginning, says the story, when the earth was a formless void, right? The Hebrew word for that is tohu vabohu. And it doesn't really mean void. It means a soupy, messy, sloppy chaos. The chaos that threatens to overwhelm. Those are the conditions in which God gets creative. In the soupy, messy chaos that threatens to overwhelm, God creates. Those are the conditions in which God creates. So, in the soupy, messy, sloppy chaos that threatens to overwhelm on the sixth day, when all sentient beings are created, God decides to create humankind. And the text reads beautifully. We find it. I think we're in a little bit of chaos right now over this whole conversation. So, what does it mean to be human? Let us create humankind in our image. And in the image of God, they were created. Male and female, they were created. And, not or, and. They were created male and female. Scientists tell us that actually, in utero, we all begin as female. And it's only 6 weeks in, when, with the addition of testosterone, that second Y chromosome becomes an X. Did you know that? We start off as female. So we might need to flip that order. In the beginning, when God created humankind, God created them female and male. And, not or. The implications of that idea are huge, I think. I'm created female and male. So is Matt. So is Jason. So is Irene. Carol. Created female and male. Not or. And. For people in transition, that's got to be good news. Yeah. Female and male. And. Our sexual attraction to others, do you see what I mean? We're already fluid. Our sexual attraction is also fluid. Kinsey backs that up. In the 60s, when he wrote his report, he backs this idea up. And that's definitely good news for those who's desiring to live out their sexuality, their sexual attraction, their God-given sexual attraction in fullness and joy, whether you're gay, straight, bisexual, transgender, or non-binary. And then what happens next? So, those two ideas were made. God created them, female and male. Right? All of this is fluid. And the very next sentence, God what? Blesses it. God blessed it. Your creation as a sexual being is blessed. However you've been made is blessed. God blesses it, according to the story. So God created humankind in the image of God. They were created female and male. They were created. God blessed them. For most people, who are not in the heteronormative status quo, the hardest person to come out to is yourself. For most people who are not in the heteronormative status quo, the hardest person to come out to is yourself, especially mired in the messages of our culture and the Christian church.
Excuse me. A lot of denominations say there's only male and female. The rest is it's of choice. That's what some of those mainstream denominations believe in. It's of choice.
Correct. You're absolutely right. Some people think it's a choice. And I'm suggesting that the story this morning might tell us a different story. That actually, this is how we've been created.
And another thing, they use the word, all the other sexes, they say they're going to condemn, go to hell.
And I'm suggesting that the story gives us a different perspective. God blessed them. If you're blessed, that might be an opposite message, that you're going to hell. What do you think? Yeah. Once you come out, you can't go back in. Finally. And I got to tell you, I can't think of a safer place to come out than Lynn Valley United Church. That's been my experience. I don't know what your experience was in my coming out. But my coming out here was a gift from God. The problem is that not enough people know it. Not enough people know it. Do you know hundreds of children and youth walk by this building daily? And if Kinsey is right, 1 in 10 of them is struggling with all of this. 1 in 10 of them is like Jamal Miles, the 9-year-old boy from Denver who committed suicide after being bullied by his friends at school for coming out. He told his friends, word got out, and the kids at school were merciless. You should just kill yourself. 1 in 10 hears the messages of the community in the church. 1 in 10 is questioning whether they're lovable. 1 in 10 is questioning whether what they've read, that God hates gays, is true. 1 in 10. You know, if there's any reason, there's no other reason, let me say, than that we would consider becoming an affirming ministry of the United Church of Canada. Affirming ministry is not about welcoming people. Welcoming suggests that we are the gatekeepers to God's grace. We don't welcome people. We don't become an affirming ministry as gatekeepers. Do you remember that story of Jesus telling the story of Jesus telling the story about the master who has a banquet and invites those who ought to be there? And do you remember they all said a reason for not coming? I bought a cow, I bought a field, I can't come. And do you remember Jesus sends then his workers out to the byways, to the fringes, to the edges, and said, come to the banquet. We become an affirming ministry as a proclamation. We don't whisper it. It's a proclamation to the world of a Christ that saves us from ourselves. A Christ that has unconditional love for all of God's creation, affirmed in the story of creation. We are an affirming congregation because we say we're sitting at the table with those Christ has already invited. It's not a gay church. It's just everyone's welcome. Not welcome. Everyone sits at the table. Christ has already issued the invitation. We become an affirming ministry to spread that gospel to people like Jamal Miles. If you're interested in offering leadership to exploring the process of our becoming an affirming ministry, I'll meet you in the community room after worship today. People, you've been created as sexual beings. It's so fluid. You've been created in the image of God to express that sexuality. It's a blessing. Go into the world blessed, that you might proclaim God's healing grace, that you might be a blessing. Please pray. Oh God, we take the next tentative steps called into your world, extending your already given invitation. May we open our doors to all those who seek to be at the table, where grace and love embodied in the living Christ can be lived experiences. We hold this prayer and offer it in your holy name.